Book One is all about the books that I've read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. She is the author of the book Out of Focus, no other than Miss Aly Vredenburgh. Welcome to Book 101, Miss Ali, and can you please introduce more about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. My name's Ali, and I'm the author of Outer Focus book. It's about the youth mental health crisis.
Miss Ali Vredenburgh, thank you so much for sharing your book to the world. Thank you so much. So, what's inspired you to write Out of Focus?
Yeah, I will say I've been working on youth mental health research since I was about 14 years old. So it's been a subject that's been so passionate to me for a really long time. I would say no one sits down and writes a book out of, you know, it's not a normal thing people do. And so the reason why I was motivated to actually write the book is I lost my best friend. And anyone who's been through grief, especially losing someone, having their best friend pass away, it's one of the hardest things I've ever been through. And I could not let her death be another statistic. And so I decided to write this book. And after having pretty great feedback, I'm now adapting it into a documentary.
Interesting indeed, Miss Ali. So, what the title suggests that the crisis is more complex than you think.
Yeah, it's way more complex than anybody tends to think about because when people think about mental illness, there's typically one real way people think about it, and it's that someone is ill, they should go get help.
Yes,
And there isn't this understanding of all the different complex social and sociological factors happening that contribute to this crisis and that make it so dire for a lot of young people right now.
certainly. So, how do social media and digital culture shape the mental health of Gen Z beyond the common narratives?
I hear you mention social media and us being digital natives. Social media is certainly a factor that many people talk about when they talk about the mental health crisis. It's usually the first thing people think about. In fact, I do interviews on the street with my social media, and I have interviewed, dozens of people, and their answer is always, "It's social media. It's the damn phones. That's what's causing it." And what I've learned through my research is that it's a lot more nuanced. And I make the argument in my book that it's actually having more to do with cultural shifts that have happened really since industrialization. I mean, have you heard of the song Eleanor Rigby by the Beatles?
Yes,
It's a beautiful song, and it's talking all about loneliness and disconnection. And I think it's a real historical tribute to these changing social factors that are happening in society. And I think that social media was kind of like the need, like the thing, the straw that broke the camel's back. Should you choose this expression? But I think it's sort of something that makes it worse, but it's not the cause.
it's not a cause, people. So, Miss Ali, did any of your findings surprise you or challenge your previous assumptions?
Yeah, I think one thing that was really shocking to me was that there's some researchers that have found data to support that it might be the case that young men are struggling slightly less with depression and anxiety than young girls because they play video games more. And I thought that was really fascinating because I think there is something to be said about being engaged in a game versus a lot of girls are more engaged in kind of their own interpersonal lives. And so I think it was a really interesting finding for me.
Indeed. So, what role do schools and educational systems play in either supporting or worsening Gen Z mental well being?
That's a really great question. I think our schools play such a pivotal role, and they're sort of like that foundation that can make or break what's really happening to young people. And what's really scary, Daniel, I'll tell you what's really frightening is that right now in America, there is about one school counselor for about 575 students on average. And that number is so scary because that means that kids that need help probably are not getting it. And we really, really need to have providers and therapists that are easy access to these kids because, like it or not, times are really, really tough for young people.
Yes, they are vulnerable. Very well said, Miss Ali. Very well said. And how does Gen Z openness about mental health both help and potentially hinder meaningful progress?
Um, I think that, can you repeat that? I'm so sorry.
No worries. How does Gen Z's openness about mental health both help and potentially hinder meaningful progress?
Yeah, it's really interesting you bring that up because openness is something we're really known for. Gen Z is known for being kind of the most politically engaged, most open generation.
Yes.
Um, but what's really interesting is the fact that rates of awareness and education for mental health go up, and yet the rates of suicide are also going up. And that kind of it counters what a lot of people say about a lot of different social issues that, if there's more education and awareness, the problem will get better. But in this case, that's not what's happening. And so I do think openness is important because it helps reduce stigma. But I think what really needs to accompany this openness is real changes in our system.
Totally agree, Miss Ali. 100%. And you discuss the generational gap. How do misunderstandings between Gen Z and older generation fuel the crisis?
I think older generations do not understand us, and I think we often struggle to understand them. A lot of older people tend to think of us as not as hardworking, or that we're not as motivated, or that we're really entitled. And some of that might be true for some of us, but what I'll say is that a lot of us feel really disillusioned by the system that we've been born into. The truth is that most of us can't afford to buy houses. Most of us are living paycheck to paycheck. And really, I don't know if you've heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but it's so important for our basic needs to be met in order to have good mental health. And for a lot of Gen Zers, our basic needs are just not being met. And I think older generations expect us to work harder and, you know, we just pull those bootstraps up and suddenly things will be okay. But in reality, we're fighting a system that just was not built for us.
True. Need to level up those things for the Gen Z, not for the baby boomers. So, how has the pandemic amplified or exposed existing mental health challenges among the Gen Z?
The pandemic was a huge problem. I actually worked with a lot of Gen Zers during that time, and there was this one girl I worked with, this teenage girl who really, I just saw how much she was impacted by it. And I was working with her, and over and over again, all she kept saying was she felt really lonely. She didn't feel motivated to go to class. She skipped most of her classes. She didn't want to go, which I couldn't blame her. I wouldn't want to sit there and go to school and look at a screen on Zoom either. It's just not natural for people. And so I saw a lot of teens just, I mean, a lot of students completely failed that year, in those years, and had to, go back a grade or start over. And that's just, I mean, the impact of that alone is just incredible. But we saw huge spikes in depression, anxiety, and suicide during that time. And that really evidences how important connection, community, and belonging are, and just how important it is for us to be able to have that like community, and even when it's school.
Hmm. Yes. So, man, you mentioned identity and societal expectation. How do this pressure uniquely affect Gen Z compared to past generations?
I think I think having this Gen Z identity, I think it does impact us, especially with employment. A lot of us have graduated college and are having a huge struggle getting jobs. I mean, there are Berkeley professors coming out saying their students aren't getting jobs. These are Berkeley graduates that are struggling. It's like um, a lot of my friends who graduated really struggle to get a job. And it's really hard because I think part of it is the job market is really tough right now, but another part of it is that Gen Z has this reputation for being, um, the quiet quitters, the snowflake generation, the generation that um, is just, we expect a lot more than other generations. We're coming in there and asking for pay raises after a few months. We're famous for that, but I think it's because we're so frustrated because we know our needs are just not being met.
Certainly. So, Miss Ali, what do you believe are the most damaging myth or stereotypes about Gen Z and mental health?
I think the most damaging myth is that mental illness is an individual problem. I think we love to tell people to go to therapy, or like we love to talk about how great therapy is. But we don't account for how important it is for all of us to connect and have empathy for one another, and how much all of this is a system we all take part in, and we all need to work together to help fight these issues. And when someone's struggling with their mental health, it's so incredibly important that people are there for those people and that we have a community around these individuals, because most of the time people who are struggling with these illnesses are really lonely, really struggling.
Are there cultural or global differences in how Gen Z experiences mental health struggles?
I What I can say about the global mental health issues is I do know that globally mental illness is the leading cause of disability worldwide. It costs our global economy trillions of dollars a year. So I know that it's an international problem. I know it's affecting every single country. And I know young people across the world are really struggling. I think that there are some communities that have better mental health because they have more ways of helping people be uplifted to have better mental health. For example, places like Finland are known to have higher happiness index, and I know that countries like that, they have healthcare available to people, basic healthcare. They have walking. They're way more walkable. There's more of a community emphasis. And I know that there's just more green spaces. And I know that when people live more in urban areas and they're more isolated and they're not having access to good nutrition, good sleep, good fitness, all of that compounds to have worse mental health outcomes.
So, Miss Ali, what would be your advice for most especially Gen Z people suffering from mental health right now?
I would say that it's really important for people to figure out what the root cause is of their mental health issues and think about it more deeply, like whether it's they're feeling they're not getting enough sleep, or they're not getting proper nutrition, or they are surrounded by people that aren't uplifting them or aren't making their life happy, or they're not, they're not in a job that they're happy with. I think people have to really think about, at least with depression, when depression's concerned, thinking about why. I like to think of depression as sort of like the body's way of warning you that something is wrong. And I think when you look at it from that perspective, then you can figure out how to put it all back together and find a therapist and find a provider and make those changes to feel better.
Thank you for your advice, Miss Ali. And what will be your short term and long term goals in writing?
I think my short-term goal right now is just to get my book out there. I'm really hoping that more people are able to read it um, and hear my message and really care about how young people are being impacted right now. My long-term goal would be to write a second book, and I'm really excited about that. But I'm not trying to jump into that quite yet because I'm working on my documentary right now.
Good luck for your goals, Miss Ali, and looking forward for your documentaries. And of course, your second book. You are most welcome to come back and let's talk about it on Book 101 review. So, Miss Ali, what role does technology addiction or overstimulation play the larger mental health picture?
I think that technology is a double-edged sword. I think it can be used for good, and I think that there's a lot of people with disabilities that find really important community online. I also
Yes.
think it's an amazing tool to learn information. I think it's a really powerful tool to get connected to resources. I think where it goes wrong is when we sit there and we worry about people's highlight reels. We worry about our own self image and how we're portraying ourselves. I think if we can sit back and look at it as a tool and think, oh, I want to do this art project. Why don't I go on here and look at all these other projects for inspiration? Or we look on it for pet ideas, like different things I can do with my pet. That would be great. But when we sit there and ruminate, that's when it becomes a problem.
Totally agree, Miss Ali. And what message do you hope readers, especially those from older generation, take away from your book?
I want people to feel empowered to be kinder to one another. I want people to feel more understanding and more empathy towards this crisis and understand that it really is a community problem and not an individual one. I want people to really advocate for prevention based practices. We've been running on the crisis intervention model for too long, and it's clear that you know, it's not helpful long term. We need that in addition to prevention based practices. And I want people to join my movement. I want people to join me in fighting for these things and fighting for. I have in my book, I have 6 comprehensive solutions that I advocate for. And I want people to read it. And you don't have to agree with me, but I want people to really start thinking about these things and having these conversations.
Certainly, Ms. Ali. But before we wrap up our discussion for tonight, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, Mental Health 101, in its first season. People, first season with Mr. Jim Smith. Please do listen to our latest episode. Of course, we are empowering mental health awareness. So please do listen, Mental Health 101, wherever you listen your podcast. So, Miss Ali, if you could give one piece of advice to someone in Gen Z struggling with their mental health, what would it be?
I would tell them to not be afraid to get help and not to be hard on themselves and not to blame themselves for what they're feeling and instead start looking for solutions.
Yes, Miss Ali, thank you so much for sharing your book to the world. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your book?
Yeah, please do. Thank you.
Yes, where they can buy your book, Miss Ali?
You can get it at outofocusbook.com um, and and on Amazon.
Yes, people, let's support Miss Ali because if you support her, more and more and more empowering mental health awareness to come. So, Miss Ali, good luck for your documentaries and looking forward for your book 2, book 3, book 4, book 5 about mental health. Keep up the good work and let's empower the world. So, Miss Ali, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
More to come, people. See you soon.